All right, everybody, what's going on? And welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. See what else coming at you. And we are continuing our 12 team previews, man. We are up to team number 6, the Grambling State Tigers. So we're going to talk about the G-men and give my thoughts on what I expect and what I would like to see from this team in the upcoming season. Camps are opening this week, so we are we are like a month away from everybody starting. We are less than a month from the MEAC SWAC Challenge. So football is here. This is going to take us all the way up to week 0, which I'll have a preview of the MEAC SWAC Challenge on the week of the game. And we'll have a recap that Sunday after the game. So if you want to see when your favorite team preview is coming, you can hit the socials. The Twitter account is SwagTalk76. That's where I have a pinned tweet that has all the dates of the upcoming previews. I'm putting together a playlist of the previous previews. So if you miss one, you can go back and check them through the playlist. That'll be posted on my socials as well. My Facebook is Swag Talk, Instagram Swag Talk. Like the video, share it, and definitely feel free to comment your thoughts on the season. I do have one caveat to throw in there. If on any of these predictions, I don't predict your team to have a great season. It's nothing personal, man. Like I said, this is all just for fun. This is all a super educated guess. Anything can happen between now and the end of the season. Teams that a lot of people think are going to be good, sometimes don't. Teams that pick to be bad, sometimes are good. So, anything can happen in the season. Don't take this as a hate. If I have a prediction you don't agree with, don't take it as hate. It's just something fun. Everybody, it's just talking. This is like the last part of talking season. So, we just, chopping it up and having a good time with this. So like I said, comment your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe to the channel because, I love to see, you guys become subscribers of the channel. Thank you if you've already subscribed, or if you haven't, why don't you go ahead and hit that button and join the Swag Talk fam. So let's go ahead and jump into this, man. We're going to start off talking about the 2023 season for Grambling. If there was a phrase I could use for this team in 2023, I would call it missed opportunities. Those missed opportunities kind of ended up being the reason why there's a new head man in charge. They opened up their season with 2 losses. One was expected, LSU. Hampton, I thought they could beat. They ended up having not that great of a defensive game, and kind of battled back offensively and ended up losing by 4. They did beat Florida Memorial as expected, and then they went on a little 2-game winning streak. And I'm not saying little to be patronizing or anything. I'm just saying little because 2 is not that big of a streak. But they went on a 2-game win streak. Defeated both the Texas teams, including beating Prairie View in the State Fair Classic, which was a big win. And that put them at 2-0 in conference play heading into the Alcorn game. You dropped that game by 1 point, and then you lose to Alabama A&M by double digits. You bounce back and beat Bethune-Cookman, lose to Bama State in a close game, in a low-scoring game, let's put it that way. And then you beat Pine Bluff, and then lose to Southern. So you had a couple games where you probably, the result could have flipped. A 1-point loss can either be a win, that loss to Southern. You had the ball inside the 5-yard line late in the game, with the opportunity to score the winning touchdown and came up short. Bama State was a 11-point game. They didn't score a lot. I'm not, you could have pieced together 2 touchdowns, you win that game. So that was a lot of missed opportunities. Same thing with Hampton. You started off kind of slow. They ran the ball on you extremely well, but you were able to kind of battle back in that game, but just not get over the hump at the end. But this team did grow offensively. Miles Crawley had a great season, and we're gonna take a look at where this team stacked up in SWAC play statistically. But Miles Crawley, who is the preseason offensive player of the year for this season, had a really solid season last year. But offensively, they were They were third in total offense, scoring 28.7 points per game. Big improvement from the previous year. Um, in total defense, they were ninth at 28.5 points per game. So you can see they had to score because their defense with as great of individual pieces that they had, they gave up a lot of points. They were second in total offense at 375 yards per game, averaged 5.7 yards per play, which was fourth in the league. Scored 38 total touchdowns on the season, which was third in the league. Defensively, they were seventh in total defense at 356 yards per points per game. They allowed 5.5 yards per play, which was tied for fifth, and they allowed 40 total touchdowns as a defense, which was the third most allowed in the conference. They had a great rushing attack last season. Had a nice two-headed monster with Floyd Chalk and Chance Williams. 162 yards per game, which was second in the league. Averaged 4.7 yards per carry, which was also second in the league. And 22 touchdowns on the ground, which was second in the league. So this was a very good running offense. Defensively, they were 10th against the run at 175 yards per game. 21 touchdowns allowed, which was the third most. And they allowed opponents to run for 4.5 yards per carry, which tied for the fourth most in the conference. The passing attack was fifth in the league at 213 yards, 16 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. The passing defense was actually second. They allowed 181 yards on the seat per game, 19 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. Those 14 interceptions were fourth in the league, so they did a good job of getting after the football and forcing turnovers when the ball was in the air. That's something that that's vital to a team to be able to take care of the football and to be able to force turnovers. They finished the season fourth in third down percentage at 36.8%. Third down defense, they were 10th at 37.8%. And fourth down offense, they were sixth at 46.7%. And then they were sixth in fourth down defense at right at 50%. So they actually went for it on fourth down 15 times, which is the fourth fewest in the conference. So they didn't really attempt a lot of fourth downs. So they either were in position to score or they ended up punting the ball away. When you look at this team, this upcoming season, like I said, of course, there's a new man in charge, Mickey Joseph. Of course, he has Eric Dooley with him as his offensive coordinator, which is a spot that I'm very curious about. And not for any messy reason, but I think that Coach Dooley is on a reclamation. Build his is a big thing. One of the things last season, it looked like by that time the season started to wrap up, I felt like they didn't really show a lot of trust in Miles Crowley. He had some interceptions here and there, but I thought that they didn't really put the ball in his hands a lot and send him out there to win games. But when you got a running attack like they did, I can totally understand that. Coach Jason Rollins is the defensive coordinator, and he's also a former Southern head coach. So he's back back on the sidelines in the SWAC, and I think he's gonna he has probably probably out of the two the biggest holes to fill. When you lose very, very key guys on your defense, Lewis Matthews, who is your leading tackler. You lose a guy like that. He had 101 tackles, and you also lose Sunday Anderson, who was preseason defensive player of the year, last season, and was also just a very, very good defensive end for you for multiple years. When you lose a guy like that, um, that kind of, those are big holes to fill. And when you lose two guys like that, that kind of makes it a little bit tougher. Your leading tackler returns in Kevin Thomas. He had 42 tackles on the season. Josh Darling is also another name to look at. He had 30 tackles on the season. Um, the guy who came in kind of with with a little fanfare um, was Andrew Jones. He transferred from Memphis. He had 15 tackles on the season. You can probably expect to see him step up as a linebacker and make some things happen. But like I said, to me, that's probably one of my biggest questions is this defense. Last season defense was not that good. I mean, they were very porous on the ground. They were a solid passing defense and forced a lot of turnovers. They finished +5 in the turnover margin, so they definitely forced more turnovers than they committed, and that's always a key. That's a big positive. Um, Anytime you have a new head coach, you're always going to have that trepidation and kind of hesitation to put a lot on them in terms of expectations. I think this team, right now we don't really know where they are in a lot of places because you're losing two guys on your offense and Chance Williams and Floyd Chalk. You lose those two guys were obviously very vital to your running game. They were number 1 and 2 in on the team in rushing. Williams had almost 900 yards. Chalk had almost 7. They combined for 15 touchdowns. They both averaged over 5.5 yards per carry. They both, broke off big runs. Different style of guy, so you can play them. You can play them kind of like a thunder and lightning type of thing. But you're losing that, and you're bringing in a guy. Well, you're returning a guy like Keelan Elder, who's a senior. A guy who's been around and been through it all. Last season, he finished with 130 yards and a touchdown. So you can kind of expect for him to be a factor on that running game. I do like some of the backs that they brought in this season. I gotta scroll my list because this season Grambling brings in 23 D1 transfers. That's 17 from FBS and 6 from FCS. So they're bringing in some guys who can really hopefully help this offense grow. A lot of FBS transfers were on the offensive side of the ball. A guy like Jordan Johnson from Hawaii and, like I said, Hargrove is another back. Those two guys, I think, are gonna be big factors in this running game. Deuce Jones at wide receiver, Jacoby Bellazer. They can team up with a couple guys who are returning for Grambling in the receiving core. Guys like Javon Robinson, who had 30 catches for 368 yards and 2 touchdowns as a freshman. Tylon Williams, he had 12 catches for 234 yards and a touchdown. J.R. Waters had 6 catches for 689 yards and a touchdown. There's potential there. I'm not going to sit and act like the cupboard is bare at Grambling. Grambling is a name that's going to always always be a factor to bring in guys. Grambling is a name that speaks for itself. So as long as you don't, crap the bed with the way you're recruiting, then you're going to always have those guys there. And Coach Joseph is a hell of a recruiter. Regardless of what you say about Coach Dooley is a great recruiter. Those two guys, teaming up, I think can really lay a great foundation for this team. Now, I do think that this season is, I think because the losses that you have, it is kind of a rebuild. I'm not gonna say it's not a total rebuild because I don't think that you're starting from square one or nothing like that. But I do think that you're adding new guys to a new staff. There's gonna be a lot of give and take, a lot of up and down. And I do think that it can happen. One of my biggest questions for this team is special teams. They really don't have a lot coming back in the actual kicking game itself. They don't return, and they don't return their starting punter or kicker. Um, Joshua Jones is a solid return guy, averaged 24.6 yards per kick return and 15.6 per punt return. So that's something there. And of course, you're always going to have other guys that can fill those roles, but filling in the special teams unit in terms of your kick game, I think is going to be very vital. Coach Rollins is a guy that has a lot of experience coaching special teams. So, I know he's the defensive coordinator, but I'm quite sure he's going to have his hand in there somewhere on special teams. So I think that, if you can fill those two spots at punter and kicker with solid guys, that would help a lot, especially early in the season. Like, I always feel like when you have a team that has questions early, you need to have a solid punting unit because your offense, it may take a little while to get going. It could hit the ground running like that. There's always variables, but I always feel like a great punt game can help your team. I know a lot of people don't love it because punting is not great. That means you're giving up possession of the ball. But if you can put your team in position to get it back because you're making a team have to drive the length of the field, then I think that can always make things better for you. But I think that this is going to be an interesting season for them. I do have some questions with some things, mainly just the experience of the new guys. Like I said, when you molding in new guys with new styles, you just never know sometimes. So that's pretty much my biggest thing. But when you look at the schedule itself, early, it shapes up pretty decently early for an opportunity to kind of pick up a couple wins, especially in the non-conference. Now, you do open up your season on August 31st at ULL. That's going to be a tough affair. Should have a great turnout there, but that's going to be a tough game. You come home for Tuskegee. That should be a win. Tuskegee's a talented team, but you shouldn't lose those type of games. And then there's Texas A&M Commerce. I didn't really know a lot about this team before I really kind of started to do a brief look into them, but they were very bad last season. They won one game. They are predicted to finish 8th in the Southland. They have a lot of new guys. They lost their leading rusher. They lost their leading passer. Their defense was porous. So if there's an opportunity to win a non-conference game against an FCS opponent, is on the road. It is this one. Like I said, I favor Grambling in this game as long as they coming out of these first two games, looking pretty good. I think they got a great shot to go there and win that game. Then they come home for Jackson State. That's a non-conference game. It's a SWAC game, but it doesn't count the standings. I know last year there was some confusion with people about those kind of games, but it doesn't count the standings. Grambling and Jackson State, when they mix it up, it's always a battle. It's tough to win in the hole. That's one of those places that, a lot of teams have a hard time winning, regardless of how good or bad they are. That's a tough place to play. Grambling is on a 2-game losing streak right now. They played in 22 and then they played in the spring of 21. So they haven't really played. They didn't play last year and they didn't play in the fall of 21. So not a continuous matchup. Other than that, they played in 19 and then 17, 16, 15, 14, and then in 12. So it's kind of been been up and down. But right now, Grambling is 8-3 in their last 11 games in this matchup. So that, historically that favors you, but in reality, I like Jackson State. Jackson State's one of those teams that I have battling it out for the East Division. I really like their offense a lot. I think their defense can improve some. This is a game that I went with JSU in this game. Just because I feel like they have a little bit more continuity than Grambling at this point. That's pretty much the only reason. The next game they have is the State Fair Classic, which is on September 28th against Prairie View. I went with the Panthers to get their lick back in this one. Now I'm not saying that it's it's cut and dry. That Prairie View is that is hands down better or anything. Because Prairie View has questions too, but Prairie View is one of those teams I think is going to be one of the top teams in the West. So I think I think they can find a way to win in this matchup. After that, they follow that game up with a matchup at home against Alcorn. This is a house of horrors for Alcorn. Alcorn, has a tough time playing at Grambling, and this is a toss-up game. Even though Alcorn is my pick to win the West, if you saw my Alcorn preview, that's no secret. This is one of those places that Alcorn kind of has a tough time playing. They lost to Alcorn. They lost to Grambling in Alcorn. They lost to Grambling in Grambling in 22, 35-6. That was a very surprising outcome. They lost to Grambling in 19 in Grambling, 19-16. They lost to Grambling in 17 as well, 41-14. They lost to them in 16 in Grambling. They lost to them in 14 in Grambling. So they haven't really had a lot of success in Grambling. So if Alcorn's gonna win this game, then they're gonna have to battle some demons historically. This is one of those matchups where right now there's a lot of questions on both sides again, but I'm going with the team I picked to win the West. But this is, to me, kind of a toss-up game because of the fact that Grambling has had a lot of success at home against Alcorn. So I would asterisk my pick there and label that as a toss-up. After that, they followed that up with Pine Bluff on October 19th. That's homecoming at Grambling. Pine Bluff, they weren't great last year. I don't really expect them to be that good this year. I think Grambling wins this game. October 26th, they go to Houston to take on Texas Southern. That's another game that I think Grambling will win. TSU has a lot of questions as well. They have a new coach. There's a lot of up and down with that team right now. So I think Grambling wins that game. They follow that game up with Bethune-Cookman on November 2nd. That's a road game in Daytona. It can be kind of dicey to play out there. Bethune-Cookman's one of those teams that's being looked at as maybe a dark horse by some people. But I think Grambling has the better team right now, and I think they win that game. They follow that up against Alabama State at home. They can, I would almost label this as a toss-up game as well because right now we don't really know a lot about Alabama State. We kind of got an idea of what to expect. We kind of got an idea of where we may stand with them, but we don't fully know. And when you don't fully know something, it can always lead to some kind of unexpected things. And playing in Grambling again is not easy. So, I do have Alabama State winning this game, but that's another game that I marked as a toss-up because I do think that Grambling can win that game. They follow that up with a trip to Huntsville to take on Alabama A&M. This game last season was to me, the margin of victory was more of a surprise than the actual result. Because right now these teams are Grambling leads the series 8-5 in the last 13 games. They've lost the last two to Alabama A&M, but before that they had won 6 straight. So they had the Bulldogs number even in those years where the Alabama A&M was a really good team. Grambling still had their number. Like I said, they dropped their last two, the first in 22 in double overtime last season. Lost the game by 21 points in a game that I didn't expect to go the way that it did. I like Alabama A&M in this game because I'm high on their offense. Like I said, I'm not quite sure where they are defensively, but I'm high on their offense. And, I think if Coach Maynard has survived this far. I think, they're going to battle, and it's a Thursday night game. So that's all. Thursday night games are always hit or miss. If you're going to have a game that you might drop that you probably shouldn't, it's always, it's typically a Thursday night on the road at that. But, you're coming off of a tough game against Alabama State, and then on a short week, you go into Alabama A&M, and you got a bye week after that. So, you might catch people looking ahead to the bye week. You might catch guys coming in not the best because of previous weeks. So that's why I kind of picked that game now. And then the Bayou Classic on November 30th. I think this is another toss-up game, but I'm going with Grambling in this game. At least right now. Y'all can mark that down. I don't hardly predict against my Jags against Grambling, but I right now, Southern has a lot of questions too. So we don't really know where either of these teams will be at by this point in the season. And, the last couple of years, these games have been close. So you kind of have to kind of go with tradition, so to speak. When you look at it, last year's game was a 5-point victory for Southern. Grambling won by 3 in 21. In 8 and 19, Southern won by 2. That was a couple games in there that didn't go that way, but there's always the opportunity for a close game in a game like this. That game in 22 was relatively close before Southern scored a couple of late defensive touchdowns to pull away in that game. But who knows? Like I said, this is one of those games where it's almost like who knows. So I'm going to go with Grambling in it, and I think that puts them, for me, at a predicted record of 6-6, 4-4 in conference. There's some toss-up games in there that, if you swing those one way or the other, that can kind of move their record up. I think the ceiling for this team is like 8-4, like 6-2 in conference, because I think, if you take like the Alcorn game or the Prairie View game or even the Bama State game, any of those 3 games, or even Alabama A&M game, all 4 of the games that I have them losing in conference play are toss-ups to me. So if you flip those, you can go 6-2. If this team is playing great football. I said a floor of 4-8, but I don't really think this team is going to be at that point. I think, with the talent they're bringing in and, having an established guy quarterback and, some weapons returning in the passing game, I think that they can kind of piecemeal themselves through the beginning of the season and find themselves, in a decent spot late. Like I say all the time when I predict some teams' floors, if Grambling goes 4-8, something went horribly wrong. That's just not a good experiment. Some things are probably going to have to be redone, but I don't see that happening. Like I said, I think 6-6 is a safe pick. Even 7-5, but I'm going 6-6, 4-4 in conference. I can, like I said, they're picked third right now by the media in the West. Third and first is not that big of a gap in the SWAC West. So if you were to go 6-2, or even 5-3, and you 2 of the, and maybe only one of your losses was to one of the teams that are predicted to be the top of the division, that puts you in a great spot for the division. And I do think that the West is going to come down to the Bayou Classic. Southern and Grambling may not be the teams that benefit from that game, but somebody's going to benefit from that game because that's just the way it's been the last couple of years, and I don't think that's going to change. So I'm excited for Grambling. I want to see, all issues with Coach Dooley at Southern aside, I do want to see him revamp and regroup and rebuild himself. And him and Coach Joseph, I think they can, be a great unit with Coach Rollins on the defense. Just got to fill those big holes on defense and, start to kind of tighten up on the run game on defense and get that offense moving and maintaining the turnover battle. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. See, we'll sign it out, and I'm going to catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.